You are listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I am your host, Celine Yeager. Each week, I bring you advice from athletes, scientists, researchers, and other experts to help you feel and perform your best, no matter what your hormones are doing. This show is a production of Live Feisty Media. Hello, strong, feisty women. I hope you all are well. So this week I have a treat. I sat down with longtime friend of the show and all things feisty strength and conditioning coach Erin Carson, who was our third guest on the show way back in 2020. And if you didn't hear that one, I will link it in the show notes for you to check out. It was a classic. Erin is a master of all things mobility. She understands better than almost anyone I've ever talked to how to use mobility work to make sure all of your muscles are firing properly and that you have access to all of those muscles in their full range of motion to run, swim, bike, lift, hike, whatever you like to do as well as you can, pain and injury free. And well, lately she has added breath work to her arsenal. She put up an Instagram post recently that caught my eye, and what it said was, I used to think breathing was just something that happened automatically, but then I discovered how powerfully it could impact my training and performance. Head exploding emoji. And then she goes on to say, turns out your diaphragm, the muscle responsible for breathing, is connected to your hip flexors and other key muscles. Proper breathing mechanics can actually improve your endurance, power, focus, and even help prevent injuries. It's like having a secret weapon right under your nose. So I thought, let me get her back in the studio, and what a great conversation we had. We talk all about how to use breath work to calm your central nervous system and find flow and improve performance and recovery, as well as how to use your breath to benefit your musculoskeletal system. Erin brings a wealth of experience from more than 30 years of working with top level athletes. She has coached some of the biggest and most successful names in the endurance sport world, such as Miranda Carfrae, Flora Duffy, Taylor Knibb. You get the idea. It was a great conversation. She is always a blast, and I hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. All right, before we get to it, give us a follow at Feisty Menopause on Instagram and Facebook. Click the link in the show notes to sign up for my free weekly Feisty 40 Plus newsletter for all the research news you can use. And join us over at our private Hit Play Not Pause Facebook group to engage with other women just like you. Thanks, as always, for the continued great reviews and 5-star ratings. I appreciate every single one of them. And lastly, before we get to it, thanks to MIDI for their continued support. I have been hearing from so many women in the audience and even in my friend circle about how they are finally getting the menopause care they've been looking for from MIDI. So thank you, MIDI, for... All right, Erin, welcome back to the show. You know, you and I have done a bunch of stuff. You've been in the feisty ecosphere here for, 4 years and counting. But I think you've just been on the show once, way back in the beginning. Am I right about that?
Maybe once or twice, but yeah, I
Yeah, I
love
mean,
it
you've
whenever
done
we
our
can get
summits
together.
and you've
So
done other things, but I was trying to remember before you came on. I was like, this might just be the second time you're actually on the show. But anyway, so I saw a post that you did recently about breathing, and you were like, I used to think of it as something you just did and happened automatically. And then you discovered how powerfully it could impact training and performance. And it was an aha moment for you. And I thought, that kind of syncs up with how I'm feeling. Like I do use my breath and always have, like racing mountain bikes, doing that kind of thing. Just getting my nervous system under control when you're in a chaotic mountain bike peloton, especially because it's terrifying, and on long
yep.
climbs and that kind of thing. But I am very curious because it sounds much deeper what you're doing here to me. And so talk to me. What was this aha moment? What made you think, there's something here about this breathing and I want to know more?
The first time I really had experienced anything where I was looking for some help was with some anxiety around the swim in a triathlon. And so I bought Simon Marshall's book, and I'm just want to look for the title of that because it's worth it. Simon just passed away uh, from pancreatic cancer.
Hmm.
And Simon's book, the cover of it says, and I'm going to swear, it says "calm the fuck down" on the
Oh, I have
cover.
that book.
Yes. So that book was really impactful and helpful for me. And I only had to get through 3 chapters. So in the book, it really talks about focus on the beginning of the breath, the inhalation, and focus on the end of the breath, the exhalation, to calm yourself down. There's no doubt in my life, not only my athletic pursuits, but my business pursuits and my coaching pursuits have been driven by a sympathetic drive,
Hmm.
by my ability. I'm a feisty, I'm just going to use that word. I'm a fiery kind of human, and I wake up ready to go and pretty lit. And that is a blessing until it's not.
Yep.
And you need to be able to shift from that sympathetic, that fight or flight drive into the much more relaxed parasympathetic drive. And how I knew that I didn't have words like that when I was really experiencing the anxiety and the fear. And so Simon really, he also became a good friend, has really helped with the beginning of the breath and the end of the breath and the explanation of how can we take you from this really nature driven Erin person into a much more relaxed, ready to not just go to battle physically and emotionally, but also be able to stay calm in the moment. So that was my first experience for that. And I came second on that day in my age group. I qualified for world championships and I had a joyful day. It was actually one of the most pleasant, hard races I had ever done. So I knew then that it was going to be an important part of learning. And I didn't know the depths of it. I didn't know the science associated, but I knew that I experienced something magical on that day. And that was in 2019. And then the pandemic came. And this is, I think, what you were alluding to. The pandemic came and I owned a gym. I owned a 40,000 square foot gym. And, nobody was racing. None of my athletes were experiencing high loads of stress. I was experiencing high loads of stress. The world was experiencing high loads of stress. And that's when I really started digging in what was the science of this, because anxiety was starting to show up in my life again on a daily basis, and not in a good way. So I had to learn to slow down. And again, it was exactly the same conversation though. So I started digging in a little bit more on parasympathetic into the sympathetic into parasympathetic drive using breath work. And I think because we had time, because of the pandemic, we discovered the book Breath by Dr. James Nestor. And so that was the first book and the first work that I really started resonating with me. But ironically, I did it on an Audible so I could walk while I was listening and learning. And that really started showing that people who overbreathe are much more predisposed to disease and bad things coming into our body. We know that stress is also a precursor to disease. And so Breath was the first book that really played well for me. And then I started looking into the aspects of performance. And that's when the Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McEwen kind of started coming into play. And I listened to that book and I started doing some of the exercises, and we can kind of talk deeper on that as we go. But the Oxygen Advantage actually comes with an entire program of retraining your body to actually be able to tolerate higher levels of CO2 in the blood. Because in the presence of CO2, we are actually able to decrease blood pH and increase our ability to absorb oxygen into the working muscles. And so if we overbreathe and we're actually exhaling most of the CO2, whereas if we can begin to tolerate higher levels of CO2 and we actually just naturally function, breathing less, the CO2 concentration goes up in the blood, we're actually becoming a much more efficient machine when it comes to using oxygen in the working muscles and transporting oxygen into working muscles. So there's a strategy to that. So then I started digging in a little bit deeper, and I went into XPT Life, Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reese's company, who we love. And I got this certification of the breathing performance specialist. And Laird and Gabby are they're brilliant in themselves. They're a little bit older than me, so they inspire me to live life, and the longevity conversation is so good with them. But they also are surrounded by a lot of very, very smart people. So PJ Nestor was my instructor online. I had time because of the pandemic, and I started digging in deeper. And if you're going to teach this stuff or speak to breath work within the world of high performance, in my opinion, you should have a little bit of higher knowledge. I know that I could go even further, but that really got me on my way. And I don't pretend to be a breathing specialist, but as a generalist and a strength coach and a high performance person, I love having it as part of my offering for sure. And it also, with foundation training, is another part of the conversation, and you and I can dig into that as you like too. So that's kind of the whole story. And without question, some of my athletes truly embrace it, the work, but I work with some really good athletes. And my thought is, if they don't want to do it, because some don't, and actually the one that I work with very frequently and current number one in the world does not love doing breath work. And I actually think the reason she doesn't like doing breath work is because very naturally she she experiences a high level of CO2. It's a very genetic thing for her, and therefore it doesn't seem necessary. And for me, I'm fine with that, because as long as she's progressing and performing and winning races, we're pretty darn happy. It's hard not to, I think as she gets older, she'll figure out the ways she will find it as a blessing in her life. But right now, she's solid.
So that was excellent, by the way. Thank you. So let's go,
In a
let's go.
nutshell.
Yeah, no, and there's tons to unpack. So I'm feeling like I want to go back to the calm the fuck down swim. What that sounds like you were intentionally, as you said, taking yourself out of a high sympathetic drive, which I can really relate to, into try a more parasympathetic yet still engaged, ready to go. And you talked about the beginning and the end of the breath. What did you really do there? Like what did that really look like?
Simplify, simplify my brain. I think our brains can take over, and it's just like, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if I get out of position? What if I drown? What if I get eaten by a shark? Like, what if fear is not a big driver for me, but more of the performance anxiety for me, probably, what if I'm behind when I get out
Mm.
of the water? I had a big goal that day, and I just needed to calm down. And again, it's a blessing and a curse, that kind of personality. And I know there's a lot of people that are just like me. So it's not that unique, but it is a beautiful thing to experience a parasympathetic experience in a high performance setting. You think better if you just trust yourself. And so the beginning of the breath and the end of the breath quieted my mind. And even on the bicycle, when I was pushing into that threshold number. So as an age grouper, competitive age grouper in a 70.3, you're typically not going to ride above threshold, but you want to stay right at threshold or just below it. And so that's uncomfortable. And so if I could just focus on the beginning of the breath and the end of the breath, all I had to do was ride. And it was really not a lot of self-talk, and it was very calming. I can remember asking Marinda Carfrae, because Ironman blows my mind. Like, people that do long things, like even 100-mile gravel rides and stuff, I'm like, what do you think about? And Rini was like, well, if you're lucky, you don't think about anything. And I think that's the brilliance of endurance sports. You can find this nothing. And so the beginning of the breath and the end of the breath, if that's as close to nothing as I'm going to get, then I'm pretty stoked.
So when you say that, are you changing your breath in any way, or is it just a matter of thinking about it. Are you inhaling in your nostrils and out your mouth? Like, is there any mechanical thing that's happening here, or is it just a mental exercise? That's where I'm
No,
disconnecting.
nose breathing is somewhat preferable.
Hmm.
So it really is much more efficient. You have to be very fit and very used to tolerating CO2 to nose breathe at that kind of intensity. So there are times when you're just in through the nose, out through the mouth, and that's pretty thresholdy. But when you get to threshold and above, you're pretty much mouth breathing because you have to. But you're, again, going back to the beginning of the conversation, if you're mouth breathing, you're getting rid of a lot of CO2 and you're just trying to get comfortable, right? And then you're probably going too hard. You're making a little bit of a mistake. So you got to pull it back. So you do find a rhythm that is tolerable, comfortable, but still working really hard.
And in before you get in the water, even, is it just a matter of also focusing on the breath? Is that what you were
Yes,
doing?
and nothing else.
Hmm.
And just clearing your mind. I think we see it a lot. Like before on the U.S. women's national soccer team, if they're shooting penalties, and you see them, they all did the same thing. I think it was the Olympics, and they quieted their mind. They stood there, and you could see them. They are some of the highest cared for athletes on the planet. Or somebody at the free throw line, they're going to breathe
Yep.
to try and bring their heart rate down, to try and calm their nervous system so that they can focus on fine motor skill of either kicking a penalty kick or shooting a free throw or putting. You see it in all sports. When you want to calm yourself down, you're going to breathe. And if you have a focus and a plan and a practice of breath, it's going to work way better.
Right, right. I'm thinking biathletes must do this.
100%. Yes, that is the
100%.
most beautiful. Yeah, because you're going from fast, fast, fast. I mean, they do breath work all the time, and their ability to tolerate CO2 is huge.
And then just steady that heart rate so they can shoot a target.
Yep. And that's just comes down to conditioning as well.
Yeah.
But if you have anxiety and you're being sympathetically driven and you can't switch it on and off, like you should be able to in an Ironman or a 70.3 or really any sport, the more you can access a relaxed state, the better.
100%.
We've all experienced watching people when they hit that flow state. If they're hitting flow state, even though there's things happening in very fast motion, their sympathetic drive, you think they're being driven by fight or flight. I bet they're not.
Yeah.
I bet that's actually quite low.
And it now that we all have like Aura rings and Whoop straps and all these other devices, I would imagine that this impacts heart rate variability.
Yes, because heart rate variability is a measure of stress. So Aura is doing a really cool, good thing, as is Whoop, as are all the wearables, because they understand that our goal is to increase our heart rate variability and therefore our recovery score, whatever their algorithm is around that. So a lot of times, if I'm not paying attention to stress, my Aura ring pretty much lets me know, try and find a quiet moment this afternoon. It's like, hey, what are you doing today, Erin? Like, how about some quiet breathing? And Aura, I that's my wearable. So I mean, I'm
Me
partial
too.
to it because I like the ring. It works for me. But the now if you click on the three dots up in the left corner and explore, there's tons of breath work, guided meditations, guided breath work that Aura is providing us to teach us and guide us. Like you don't have to go any further than that, or you just Google breath work and there's tons of apps, because from a health perspective, if we can decrease the amount of time we spend in a very stressful state, we will live longer. We will decrease our chance to get diseases. We will be happier. We will have better relationships and friendships and be better leaders and better athletes and all of the above. So heart rate variability, if you watch your trend, people will slam wearables because they're not exact, or, they need more studies. And I'm like, that's crap, because it might not be exact compared to what though? Like how many of us are actually going to go do a sleep study where we're just got wires and headphones and all the things?
And I have done that, and that's crap too, because let me tell you how impossible it is to sleep with like this light thing on your nose and clips, and like you're wired up Please.
Right.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's really what we're looking for more than anything is a consistency that we're wearing it. And it can, and when we're wearing it, my partner only wears it at night. So her algorithms are completely messed up, but she does get a heart rate variability score every single day. And if you can see the trend, if the trend is downward sloping, then you better start actively figuring out some protocols. And that's my biggest thing right now that I'm working on. I'm trying to encourage all the people that I work with and around to establish protocols, because protocols are easy. Once you say, okay, I have a downward trend of heart rate variability, which means my stress load is elevating. I'm getting into a less and less healthy state. So here's my protocol. For the next 5 days at 1 o'clock, I'm going to take 1 hour of peaceful time. I can do yin yoga. I can do guided meditation. I can take a nap. I can walk with my dog. I can play with my friends' kids. Like, whatever it is, like, friends' kids are way better than your kids from a stress perspective. I understand, but it's finding the things that you find peace in, and then see if that works. Hydration is huge. So my first thing on my protocol is, am I dehydrated? Because that'll immediately start to decrease your HRV, and your level of stress will go up. If you're dehydrated, am I not eating well? Am I not sleeping well? Like, there's all these little things that we can establish protocols. If I'm not sleeping well, what do I need to do? Like right now, I just got back from Spain a week ago, and I came back and I'm like, I'm going to establish a better sleep hygiene. So every day I make my bed and I fold it down halfway so that when I open the window, that's another one of my protocols. I have fresh air in my bedroom all day when I'm not in there. And all that fresh air is in the sheets. And I fluff all the pillows. So I'm like, sleep hygiene protocol, here it is. Number one, will I sleep better? And when I get in bed and I pull those sheets up, I feel way better, and it could be the process of the protocol, or it might be what I'm actually doing. I'm not sure. But having that focus of going to bed on time and holding myself accountable to sleep, my HRV starts coming up. And then I'm like, okay, I'm onto something. And I actually have something that I articulated that I was going to do, because then it can be repeated, because
Yep.
life continues to happen. So protocols around sleep, protocols around recovery, around resting, and try and find peaceful moments. I think it's worth spending an hour or two for us all to come up with some protocols for ourselves.
Yeah, I totally agree. So then, how does the breathing that you're talking about here with the parasympathetic compare with what you're doing in these exercises to build up your CO2 tolerance?
So the exercises to build up CO2 tolerance involve breath holding. So it's really important to be patient, and it's really important not to have an extreme expectation when you're holding your breath, because you need to adapt your ability to tolerate higher levels of CO2. So I can give you a first example of what I did. If you're out walking the dog, you're breathing and this is not Wim Hof breathing. This is not
Yeah.
It's not aggressive breathing. This is a normal breath pattern. Inhale. Nose mouth is a nice pattern. Nose is a nice pattern. Then on the exhale, you don't breathe.
Hmm.
And when I'm walking my dog, I try for 10 steps. And then I just go back to normal breathing. And then once I'm ready, I'll do that again. I'll inhale, exhale. I don't try to blow all the air out. I don't get extreme. I just blow out, close my mouth, and walk calmly for 10 steps. Over time, I should be able to extend that to 15 steps or 20 steps. A child